Good morning. Welcome to Sober Life Rocks podcast. I'm your host, Margy Schaller, and I want to welcome you today and let you know that you are not alone. How many of you listening have struggled going to meetings, to travel, the hotel bars, the airport bars, all the things, and really don't want to be drinking during those times? I know I have, and I've often felt alone with that. But we have with us today a guest who I'm so excited for you to get to know. Greg is a amazing man. He has his own business, the GNA Consult, which leads the charge in fixed full arch dentistry. Now, I'm dying to know a little bit more about what that is, but basically what he does is he takes single office practice dentists into thriving implant practices, and oftentimes even goes into large group practices, all while optimizing their valuation and EBITDA. Oof, that's a mouthful. Greg, welcome to the podcast.
It is a lot. Yeah, thank you for welcoming me. I want to meet that guy. That sounds super impressive. It sounded way too formal for just some former drunken drug addict who now has been sober for quite a while. And it just sounded way too poofy. And if you notice, I took off my glasses. That's like my Clark Kent look and like the mask that I used to hide behind. And now you get the real me. So yeah, thank you for the invite to come and share some of my story and what it's like in the dental world and in the world in general, but specifically in the dental world. As you were reading that opening to the podcast about, the bars, the hotel bars, the airport bars, walking by them, and I'm going to jump right in, but it just gave me a flashback of just last week being on the road and the decision of, do I want to go out to eat somewhere? No, I'm exhausted and it's 9:30 at night and I just got to this new location and I have to be up early tomorrow morning. And the only thing open is the hotel bar to grab a bite to eat, or I can order Uber Eats or DoorDash and good luck with 45 minutes to an hour to have that delivered, or I have no other options. And I don't want to sit down in the hotel bar because it's 9:30, 10 o'clock at night and people are coming back from dinner in Nashville and you can imagine the crowd that's going to be in there. So yeah, I jumped the gun on the conversation, but you gave me a flashback to last week and went, oh, okay, I know where this conversation is going to go. Thanks for bringing me right back there, Margy.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's take it there because I too just last week was at a hotel and the restaurant was only open like for breakfast and lunch or something. And so the only place you could get dinner was at the bar. And all of my friends, all my colleagues were gathered there. And that's my choice. If I want to socialize, that's where I go. And
yeah, and at times when I'm in a good space, it's perfectly fine, right? When I'm in a fit spiritual condition, that's perfectly fine. But the fact that that's my option, right? Like, can't there just be some tables that are open where if I don't choose to be around people who literally are like 5 feet from me, where I can smell the Jack Daniels on their breath as they're just saying hello to me, or I have to stare at a rack of bottles? I mean, there should be more choice in general, I would think. At least, if I ruled the world and if I did, it'd be a scary place to live. At least that's what I continue to tell people in my realm, in my world around me. So it's being mindful of, right? And not being put into situations where, because for me, being a sober man, it's that I don't like to put myself into compromising situations because I never know when, right? It's going to get to a point where it's like, I'm not comfortable with the situation that I'm in right now. And I've been sober for quite a while, right? And so, but it still doesn't mean that it's not sitting back there and, I can get a little squirrely at times. My story is, I grew up in a household where, my mother passed when I was very young. My dad was a raging alcoholic, remarried an alcoholic. It described as a war zone growing up, was kicked out of the house on Saturday nights when I was in high school, figure out where to go because you damn kids, we can't afford a hotel room to go and enjoy it. I mean, just not a good situation. Alcoholic from the word go, right? I never had a casual drink, so some people have a different experience. And fast forward to to the age of 33, and I just had enough, right? I'd had enough of the experience of ruining myself and my body and all the experiences. And we don't have to go into the war stories of, the one that people always ask me to share in sobriety when I share my story at recovery meetings, is the running down the off ramp of 7th Avenue of I-10 here in Phoenix and being chased by the cops and being tasered and tackled and all of that fun stuff. I mean, like just tons of ridiculousness, right? I mean, and I don't say that to brag, just ridiculousness. But getting sober and the options of being sober and being in sales and wanting to fit in and going out to dinners because clients want to go out to dinners and and then fast forward even then, right? And I know I'm glossing over, and let's go back and talk about any part of it. But now with my husband, and been with my husband for 11 years, and he's a normie. And for those of you who don't know the language, like he's a casual drinker, like he can pick it up and put it down with impunity. It doesn't, and so it's people. I'm sure people will say, well, what do you mean you don't want to sit at a bar and have dinner? I mean, if you're around it and he has beverages and you're married to him, you made that choice. It's not about that. It's about like having options to not be exposed to it. And then, parlay into the dental conferences and having opportunity where we can network and we can have everything that's not revolved around drinking. And the evening gala events aren't always around drinking. There can be another option, another opportunity. And you don't have to be sober. It can be you just choose not to because you want to be fresh the next morning, because there's so much good content and so much good networking and availability to meet with colleagues. And we get excited about going. And that's the fun part, right? You get excited about going, whether you're going to be in a booth representing your company or, who you are, or whether you're, a free range chicken and roaming around and getting to meet with all the people, or going to CE or whatever the case may be. And so I would love to know that there's more option and opportunity to not have to be exposed in order to enjoy that piece of it. So that's my diatribe. I'll pause there.
I was going to say, in 5 minutes, you covered half an hour worth of what I was hoping we were talking about.
And coffee. Like, see, I love caffeine. So, I'm going to have some while I'm on your podcast, Margie. I hope you don't mind.
Right. Excellent. Okay, so I'm just going to back us up a little bit.
Sure.
We don't need to go into the records of your youth because I get that, and many people who have lived through it get that. So bring me, though, into adulthood. Like, what kind of work were you doing in your 20s and early 30s?
Yeah, so I mean, I was one of those that, knew that an education was important, got my undergrad degree, got a graduate degree, and pretty much just stayed working in, I did the whole working on Capitol Hill thing, and, that wasn't working out for me. But I mean, I pretty much stayed a bartender. I mean, I did some other jobs that I won't mention here publicly, but if you ever want to have a private conversation, say, Greg, what was that other job that you didn't want to mention publicly, which I'll share with you. Let's just say it was a little seedy in the underbelly of society, for a brief period of time. But I never really actualized into a career at all. Like there's a few parlays into like the business world, but they were very brief. So I never actually started my career until I got sober. And so that delay of still plays into my mind, like even as a 53-year-old now, almost 20 years sober, where it's like, oh, I wonder if I got a late start on life. Especially when I was in my early sobriety, where I saw people my same calendar year age who were then, oh, well, they've been in the industry for a decade and look at how much further they've advanced because they didn't put a pause on their life because they, did what they, and so for me, it was never actuating on the degrees and, oh, look at the potential he has, because literally I was either a waiter or a bartender for that decade and a half. I just continued on with what I was in my early 20s. So I didn't have an experience like some had where they were, oh, I lost my career. And I never really actually started a career because I was, my career was drinking and other, right? Solid forms of alcohol. Doing that thing, right? And the geographics everywhere, right? And becoming a golf pro too. I did that because, that I don't know if they actually drug tested for. Maybe that's why I did that. I'm not sure. That's a whole other story. I don't know. We want to go. That's another podcast we could do.
Right. Okay. So you get sober, you're 33. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
And after the fog clears and it's time to figure out what you want to be when you grow up, what did that look like?
Yeah, so bartender for the first 6 months of my sobriety, and then
Ooh,
opportunity came along in rental car. So I got into rental car, and it was a determination of do I work at the airport or do I work out in the city, right out in the suburbs? And the suburbs was more of the career path rather than just ringing up tickets at the airport. Took the career path, got into corporate training very quickly, was scooped up by that, which was amazing, right? It gave me foundation of what I really base a lot of what I do now. It was the frontline performance group, and they're amazing even today. I still have friends there today, and so that was foundationally, and it was a regional rental car company, Advantage Rent a Car, which now is a part of the Hertz brand, but it was independent. It was regional, family owned for 2.5 years, and so even then I was traveling. So I was traveling to 5 major markets, to Seattle, to Salt Lake City, to all these markets. And so again, young and sober, still didn't know what the heck I was doing with my sobriety, but some of the foundational pieces early on that I knew to do was, you know what? I bet they have recovery meetings in other cities. So find your
mhm,
people. And so that really was core foundationally what I would do in the evenings. So to occupy my time because I had nothing
mhm.
but time on my hands. Right. At that
Yeah,
point, it was, during the day, I would be, doing training with my team members in whatever city I was in. And then the evening, I had time on my hands. So I knew, okay, at that time, it wasn't really that good with the internet because that was like almost 20 years ago. So, you would call the central office or you would look up, you'd find the
yeah,
books and you'd get the books for the meeting books and you'd know where to go and you'd find your meeting and you go to the meeting. And then generally, like there'd be people there, and it's your people, so they would invite you out for
yeah.
a bite to eat or whatever the case may be. So that was really early in my career for the first 2.5 years. Then that company was sold, and then I backed my way into dental, and that was almost 18 years ago. And I say backed my way
Mhm.
because I was looking at like people would talk about like medical device, like oh yeah, that's really sexy, right? That was the medical device, get into medical device. And I saw, I think it was on monster.com, again, aging myself, there
Yes.
was a job for dental and I applied for it. And I just remember the bravado that I had going after this job. And I did. It was my first job in dental. And again, that involved traveling. And I just kept with that same pattern of going to meetings. And it hasn't been all, sunshine and roses because even at the dental conferences, so much of it, even early on, I remember, was if you were a vendor and a manufacturer, and then naturally, like the people with the big personalities was okay, the big manufacturers all had these big blowouts, right? And the big blowouts
Yep.
all had to do with drinking. And it's
Yep.
like, the bosses kind of expected you to go, but I felt
Yep.
super uncomfortable going. And so there was always this push and pull. Like, do I please the boss because I want to move ahead in my career because I'm already so far behind? Or do I protect my sobriety because, even at then was like 4 or 5 years sober, still a little iffy. And so it was a constant pull and push and pull, even back then, earlier on in sobriety, for sure.
And I can completely relate to that. I've told the story before where my very first job in dentistry, I was hired to run the education department at Zimmer Dental.
Mm,
And in order to help me understand kind of this world and our speakers that we were working with, they sent me to a conference. I believe it was Amos in Boston. And my job was to take out some of our speakers and wine them and dine them. Literally the term, literally the assignment. And I was a wine drinker. So there I go. I get to the restaurant. They hand me a book full of my best friends, the wine list. And in that moment, you freeze,
yeah.
right? Because I don't want to like get into bed with these imaginary friends and start romancing them. And so for me, what I had decided to do was to say, "Oh, I don't know a whole lot about wines. Does anybody else want to pick one?"
Mm,
And that way, just get that physically away from me. But then the torture of sitting there and smelling the aroma of these best friends, these glasses of wine surrounding me, everybody doing the cheers, and I'm here with my little water. I
yeah.
mean, it's not comfortable. It's not an easy thing. So do you have any stories like that? And what did you do?
Yeah, well, and the sobriety thing about being a part of and not apart from, right? What you just described of people cheersing and holding up their glasses. And I tried a number of different strategies. I remember early on as well that there were two doctors that I went out to dinner with, and they ordered a couple of margaritas. And I said, no, no, I'll pass. And they said, oh, you sure you don't want anything? I'm like, no, I'm allergic. And then they gave like the medical term and they went on and on. And I'm like, guys, I know you were just doing blow in the bathroom earlier today. Like let's not even have this conversation. Like that's literal. Like I'm not like making that up. That's literal, right? And so I'm just thinking, okay, that line's not going to work. The best strategy that I had though, and I'm really grateful for a friend of mine who's still a good friend of mine, Bill Benjaminson. And it was early on when I got on with Neodent. I was one of the first employees with Neodent before it launched in the US market. And he doesn't drink. And so I asked him, I'm like, what strategy do you employ? And he said, look, he said, if I go out to dinner, there's a level of, I don't want to use the word expectation, but I will. And to
Hmm.
turn the wine menu over. Now, mind you, I was a bartender for a long time. I mean, I used to like with the big jugs of red wine, so like the cheap stuff, but at times I drink the good stuff too. And red wine still to this day, a nice filet mignon, like the red
Hmm.
wine still calls to me. It still likes to chirp in my ear, like,
So
wouldn't that be so good? Right. But anyway, so back to the story. And what Bill shared with me, what he did and what I adopted was simply finding like a trusted person, right? At least the most trusted person that I could find in the group, hand over the wine list and say, keep it under, and
hmm.
just give a dollar amount, right? And say, keep the bottle under this amount. And if they balked at it or said anything, no problem. If you'd like something, that's a little bit, more selective, no problem. That one's on you. And just being very matter of fact about it. And I literally got zero pushback from that point forward using that strategy. And it worked, and now I do some work with another company that I work with, and they don't allow any type of alcohol whatsoever to be, given out, paid for on the bill whatsoever, because that's their belief
Really?
system. And it's kind of like, I kind of like that. I got no problem with that. I've been working with them 2.5 years. I'm like, this is my wheelhouse. Like, I love this. So it
So
works
I'm
for
curious.
me.
So,
Yeah.
okay, so let's say that you're taking out a group
Yeah.
under that umbrella of this company that does not support or financially pay for other people's alcohol. Do people have the option to order for themselves?
Yes.
Okay, so let's play that conversation out. So I'm your guest. I sit down, and how does that work? The waiter comes to the table and says, "Can I take drink orders?" What do you say in that moment?
Yeah, it's, we're happy to provide, all of the food and everything that you'd like under that banner. Any alcoholic beverages, though, would be of your own volition.
Wow. And what kind of reaction do you get?
Uh, I get almost zero pushback from it. I've at a time or two, most of the time I've already prepped it and put it out there beforehand, by simply making the statement saying, we don't we don't support providing alcoholic beverages. It's just a company policy, and leave it at that.
You
Yeah.
know, that's something that anybody can use anytime, whether or not it's your company
Anywhere,
policy.
anytime, doesn't matter if they're sober, sober-ish, sober life rocks, non-sober. And if you think about it, think about the liability involved. Think
Right?
about the
It's
amount of
crazy. It's
liability
crazy.
involved with companies that are buying beverages and they don't know how people are going out into the world afterwards, if they're driving themselves, driving a rental car. I mean, how there isn't a story, and I don't want to be morbid about this, but how there isn't a story about an employee of a company imbibing too much, getting behind the wheel, and something horrible happening. How has that not been, and I don't want to put the juju out there, so, let me sage
No.
the world. But I mean, how that hasn't happened. I mean, that is a real thing, right? I mean, we live in the real world. I can tell you, like, you said we're not going to go back into the stories, but like my DUIs, I mean, one of them literally, I couldn't find my way home on a route that I'd driven many, 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 many times, sideswiped a car and ended up six pointed ended up pointed with police on a 6-lane highway and basically
Yeah.
fell out of the car. And it
Yeah.
damaged my car so much that the overhead light was on the entire time because I had smashed the front and the hood. The car ended up being totaled. Like, definitely a God of my understanding was guiding my moves that day. Like, if that happened to me, like, and I can't tell you how many, and I hesitate to even say this, more than dozens of times, that driving in a blackout where I wasn't even aware, and how did I make it home? Like, you can't
I'm
tell me
sure it
with
has. I'm
what I
sure it has.
witness is so many times at so many of these events, not just in dental, it happens in so many different verticals and industries, right?
Everywhere.
So how it is that, you know, one of the reasons why I became a founding member of Sober Life Rocks when this came to my attention very early on last year is that normalizing being sober, normalizing not drinking, normalizing having options at dental conferences, it's almost as if, how has this not come about before? So what you and what Laura Nelson have brought forward, it was a no-brainer. And then of course me learning to adopt and being like, okay, it's not like a sober platform where certainly some of us are sober, right? But it's also about the allies and also about those that choose not to or that want to have an opportunity at platforms, at conferences to be able
Mhm.
to take advantage of the opportunity of being at conferences, which is the
Yeah.
networking, which is sure it's the CE, but I know I've heard you say, right? You can get CE anywhere, right? But sometimes the in-person CE is even better. But it is the collegial relationships you can build. I know for me in my
Mhm.
business, I'm super grateful that all of my business is referral. I've been able to build a great business that is explosive right now in growth, and I'm hiring people into the company. And it's referral from existing clients and referrals from industry partners. And being able to support industry partners and those that are burgeoning entrepreneurs and be able to coach and guide them and mentor them as they're building and growing and give them support. It's the same, like that doesn't happen. Well, it doesn't happen. That is much more difficult if you don't have an opportunity to do that at these conferences, to do that
Yep.
networking. And for those that are questioning whether or not they should be imbibing in alcohol, those that are sober, whether it's newly sober or like you and I mean, we're actually litter mates, which is amazing, which we just found out recently. For those who don't know what litter mates are, it means you're the same sobriety year. So for that, it's incredible that to talk about a platform where people can experience and have opportunity to feel comfortable and to normalize the choice
Yep.
of sobriety, the choice of being sober, the choice of not drinking at these events and still be able to get the most out of it. I think it's amazing.
Yeah.
And so hats off to you and Laura for coming up with the concept and then bringing it forward, having the courage to bring it forward, because it
Thank
really
you.
is courageous to do so and to be able to put your moniker out there and say, yep, this is who we are. This is what we do. And that's why I'm such a big fan and big supporter and a founding member, frankly.
Absolutely. And you've just been amazing to sort of hear your stories and have you part of this. So let's take a little bit of a turn though, because for 18 of the 19 years that I've been sober, I was not public about it. And I mean, I was shamed. There was some people who said, you might not want to talk about that. And
Mm,
and there are people who, for a variety of reasons, all of which are valid, aren't yet ready to shout it from the rooftops, aren't yet ready to even share it with their colleagues, aren't yet ready to share it with their bosses. So, and I'm just going to put this out there. I think that in our society today, women talking to women can sort of talk about more of these touchy-feely things and be emotionally present and supportive than sometimes the men can. So I would love to hear from your point of view, like as a man navigating the business world, for people who aren't ready to just be fully out there and open about it. Like, what are some of the things that you see or suggest, or what are your thoughts about that?
yeah, well, I'll draw a parallel, right? And so for me, being a gay man, I was not out about that until fairly recently. I was to certain select individuals, and it was kind of hushed
Mm-hmm.
quiet because it was my perception that in the corporate world, it would ultimately hold me back. So I
Yep.
would change pronouns. I wouldn't be as out loud, if you will, about it. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm running down the street naked and tattooing across my forehead and slapping in your face and forcing you to swallow it. Like, that's not it, right? But I did make the commitment that, as I relaunched G&A Consult a couple years ago, that I would be who I am, that I would talk about my husband, not about my spouse, that I would talk about being sober in a free-flowing way, and that I wouldn't be ashamed of my past. And that takes a lot of work. And certainly there are times when I still, to this day, will still hearken back and think, like, I was really open about that. And I've been on a number of podcasts, probably 12 to 15 in the last year. And there's a couple of podcast spots where I've been very open about my story, right? And it's definitely a calculated risk. So to answer your question openly, for me, what I found as well is that it was finding a safe spot, a safe place to start to share that. And then it was expanding that circle out. And
So what does that look
knowing
like
and
in real life?
it,
What is finding a safe
yeah.
space look
So
like? What is
for me, it was, there's going to be people that I can share that with, right? It's finding people, it's finding right? It's finding people that are like you, that are very open and authentic. And once you throw a little tester out into the water, right? And it doesn't necessarily have to be like that I'm sober. It's just there's ways that we comment on, right? There's ways that we comment on things where we find if we have a safe audience, and then we can talk more about that. And especially in man to man in male society, it's starting to change for sure. But there still are limitations to it. What I have found is that I just, because of who I am, it's like a gravitational pull. Others that are like-minded tend to gravitate toward me, and I just need to be okay with the fact that I call it the 20-60-20 rule. 20% of the world not going to like you no matter what you do. 20% of the world are going to love you no matter what you do. And 60% of the world, they really like either way, it doesn't matter. So am I going to spend 80% of my time trying to get 20% of the people who are never going to like me, right? And a lot of times it's all in my head anyway. So it's that finding that safe space, that safe place. And there are others, and ways to find are, a great way is on platforms, on social media platforms. I live pretty out loud authentically. If you look on any of my socials, right, my LinkedIn, my personal LinkedIn, even my company LinkedIn, but my personal LinkedIn, my personal Instagram, yeah, absolutely. It's got like the great pictures of what I do with clients and whatnot, but you'll also see an ugly picture. You'll see if I'm sick, you see a picture of me sick. And I'm going to say, I'm sick, I'm run down, like that's somebody who is okay just like suiting up and showing up. Are they all airbrushed? No, maybe a few, like maybe, my husband will like make me look a little bit better in my LinkedIn like profile photo. That's okay, right? It's not Botox, it's just touching it up. Like even some of the best photographers in dental, I just heard one speak last week and they're like, you should be touching up 100% of your photos. It's not putting false information out there, just little improvements, right? So that's what I would say is that, finding that spot, and thank you for pulling that out and being like, yeah, you're not giving me a pat answer here. Like, where do you find that is seek it, right? If you seek it, you'll find it. If that's what you're trying to look for. And especially in safe places, LinkedIn for business people, LinkedIn for business people, Instagram for more of the social, but even that, just finding and putting it out there. If you're looking for it, you'll find that. And then don't be afraid to DM somebody, message them, talk to them. Hey, I'd love to talk to you about specifically this. And most people are going to be open to that.
Yeah. Now, what about, again, let's just play a scenario out. You're nervous about losing your job, and you may work in a work culture that is all about like the bravado and the bumping chests and the hey man, let's go hit the happy hour after work. And in order to feel part of, in order to your boss invited you and the whole team's going, like, what are some tips to navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to tell you that I have some good answers to that. I experienced some of that, in my past, in my work history. I would say I didn't navigate it very well, right? Because I wanted desperately to be a part of that, and then when I didn't, it would be, I mean, and this isn't like a long, long time ago either, right? And it was an internal desperation to be wanted, right? To be a part of, and that, it's going to hold me back. And it would be that snapback. It would be the snide comment. So to say like, what are some tips? I didn't navigate it well a lot of the times. What I did find is that I found a person or two on the team that I could have quiet conversation with. I would observe people that weren't a part of necessarily like an all in with the rah, 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 or that said, that would make a comment like you would hear people talking about, so what did you do last night? Oh, I was in bed by like 8:30, or finding like some of the people who, have kids, right? And we're like, oh my God, like I crawled into bed and I watched Netflix. Like it's the first quiet night I've had alone away from the spouse and the kids in the last like 6 months, right? And finding those individuals and striking up conversation, genuine, authentic conversation. And I found myself gravitating towards those individuals because they were more similar, more like me. And so rather than let's go out for happy hour and a drink, it was like, we might still go as a group, but when the group went there, I would hang out with those couple of individuals and then we would exit stage left quietly. And so
That is so interesting. That's
we
exactly what
would
I
find
did.
that way. And then it was like, you want to go grab a quick bite to eat because I want to be in my pajamas and in bed too by 7:30. It was a long day and we've got to be up at like 5:30 because it starts at 7:30 tomorrow. So it was just finding those little subtle strategies. And a lot of it's like the body language. Who are you witnessing that really isn't like a part of that, or those that are doing it and you can tell that they're doing it just to save face, or the ones that leave early. So it's a lot of those little subtle things that I really used
Yeah.
to navigate the waters when it came to that. And it also
And
opened up
still to this
opportunities
day,
too. Yeah.
still to this day, that's exactly what happens with me. And this is one of the reasons why when we talk to people who are throwing these parties, whether you're a meeting planner, whether you're a company who wants to have a big bash, this style of networking is just as valid as the style with the loud music and the big voices and the big drinking. It is just as valid. And the conversations are really cool. So set up a space where people can go to an after party, which has both types of environments. Make sure that there are some lounge like chairs and smaller tables that people can sit and have those quieter conversations, and they will stay longer.
Yes. And I can tell you, being in the food and beverage industry as long as I was, right, understanding some, and trust me, like all of the event planners of the world, please just laugh and giggle at whatever I'm going to say. But I can tell you that knowing what that negotiation is, there's a big difference between paying like for a full bar per person and paying like per drink, right? You can still host the bar, but if you think about it, the more people who are choosing not to imbibe at those types of events and doing it on more of a per drink basis or whatever the case may be, or giving tickets to, or whatever the case may be, in doing some type of limitation, right? I know that's not like the kosher thing to do because, oh, we have an open bar and we're paying for the premium liquor and look at us, we're throwing around 50,000 instead of 30,000 and we got, a ABC company to pay for it and look at, oh, thanks for hosting that for us. What if you were to invest like instead of the 50,000, the 20,000 into the bar and put that 30,000, take that, put 20,000 towards an amazing meal in addition to it, instead of just like cheese and crackers, and then the other 10,000 donate to, some organization that's meaningful. So why not say we're making a conscious choice? You're paying for this event, which is 50,000 over here for like full premium open bar for 3 hours and cheese and crackers, or it's, and give an option. And literally you could make a much bigger deal and promote that $10,000 donation with a big fat, like huge check and make an announcement. And so I'm just saying there's a lot of different ways other than just saying, well, we want a sober option, right? Which we do, but I'm just saying there's other ways to skin a cat. There's other ways to look at this where it's a win-win-win situation, right? For the event planners, for those that are sponsoring, and even those that want to go like with the tickets. If you do a ticket thing, like I know it's like, oh, I don't want to do tickets. Yeah. Well, what's going to happen with all the people who are sober who are getting those drink tickets? Find the drunks and here, you want to imbibe? Here's mine. Take them. I don't need them. Right. And then they get to be the winners too, because it's like, here, you're taking my drink tickets. Let me buy you a drink. Yay. Like I'd buy a drink for the people that I know that are the drunks. We all know who they are anyway. Like, I mean, right? I mean, so and I know I'm being a little facetious, but not so
No,
much. Like,
totally,
literally, I can
totally.
tell you at a conference last year, like, I was in line because I was going to get myself a club soda. And one of those people walked up, oh, hey, how you doing, Greg? It's like, yeah, we hardly ever talk, but I know because I'm like second in line and there's a line of like 12 people, you're pretending that you're with me because you need to get
You
another
want
drink
to
and you
drink
already have like
faster.
a full one and one that's almost empty because you can't have like less than one full drink in your hand at any one time because it's free and it's premium. Like, God bless you, honey. Like, oh, bless your heart. Like, I remember when I was you, except I was in my 20s, but I didn't have a career. Like, you're in your 50s. Like, honey, you know, don't you think it's
Yeah,
time? But and nonetheless, like I don't mean to be that
yeah,
condescending, but I do, right? But I'm just saying there are ways, and if we start to slowly, by 1 degree, turn that ocean liner, once we get about 57 nautical miles down the road, we'll be at like a 15-degree difference. And so
yeah.
slowly, and that is another reason why being a founding member of Sober Life Rocks, it's not about being a teetotaler. And those who don't know what a teetotaler is, just Google it. It's fantastic, right? I think it's just fun words like that. For those of us that are friends of Bill W., we just like the old
Yeah.
school words because they haven't changed the big book in the first 162, 164.
4.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh, my sponsees are going to get on me for that one. So anyway, there you
So, Greg, I just think this has been amazing. There's so many little pieces there that I love. As we kind of come to an end, I'd want to make sure, are there any other thoughts that you want to share, or, because you and I are further down the road, encouragement to those who are just starting out?
come to the end and further down the road. I mean, it kind of sounds like we're starting to write our obituary, Margie. So I don't know if I like those those phrases.
No,
No, I
but
would,
we know that there are people who are starting this journey today. Like, what would you
no,
say,
I
navigating
do,
business?
I do, and the next indicated thing, whatever the next indicated thing is, and sometimes the next indicated thing is just don't take that drink for right now. Reach out to somebody right now. If it's a matter of you're afraid that fill in the blank, that's okay. You know, reach out, call out. My name's pretty unique, right? It's easy to find me. Whether you DM me on Instagram, whether you do it through LinkedIn, call me. The number's right there. That's my cell phone. Don't be afraid to reach out. And even if you don't know what to say,
Mhm.
even if you don't know what to say, hey, Greg, I saw you on a recent podcast. You don't even have to mention this one because trust me, I've been on a bunch of them, right? We can just start a conversation. Reach out to someone in your circle, talk to someone and say, I'm struggling, whatever the case may be, right? Wherever you're at. And if you stumble and if you mess up, it's okay. You're not a bad person.
Okay.
Sometimes you just do a bad thing. I'm not a bad person. I did some bad things, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad person, right? And
Mhm.
so wherever your journey is, whatever brought you to where you are today, to listen to this, to engage in conversation with anyone from Sober Life Rocks, whatever's making you look at, if you're considering that possibly you drink too much or that you need to take a look at your drinking, that doesn't happen by accident. Let me repeat that. If you're looking at maybe you drink a little too much, that doesn't happen by accident, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean you're an alcoholic because I'm not going to call you that, right? You have to take a look at that on your own, even if it just means curtailing some. I mean, we have one of our great sponsors, and I don't want to mention one because then I'll have to mention them all, and there's a lot of them, and hopefully you've got it all, the plugs in there. But he even talks about the fact that he makes the conscious choice now when he's working in one of his capacities that he drinks water. He chooses not to drink while he's working because he feels that it's better for his performance. He's more engaged. He gets energized enough. He gets that rush enough by not drinking, and that's a choice that he makes. That's okay too. It doesn't mean you have to put the plug in the jug 100%. I react and respond differently to alcohol and other forms of alcohol in solid forms than a lot of other people do, and that's okay too. So wherever you're at on your life's journey, right? It's okay where you're at. You're perfectly okay. You are perfectly okay. You're a beautiful human being. There's nothing wrong with you. There might be something a little wrong with your behavior at times and with some of the actions you're taking, but there's nothing wrong with you. And that's the message I want you to hear because I can tell you that there are way too many people in my 19 years of sobriety that I have lost along the way who have tried the path of sobriety, who have tried cutting back on their drinking, and the blame and shame internally has brought them down to a path and they've taken their own life or done something really stupid and overdosed or whatever the case may be. That doesn't have to be your story today. So just take a different action, right? Do the next indicated thing.
That's it right there. That's all we need. Craig, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
I
so
appreciate the
much.
opportunity on the platform for sure. Thank you for having me be a guest. Thank you for all the work you and Laura are doing to found and lead the charge. And I'm really am honored to be a founding member, and anything that I can do to uplift this and normalize being sober and sobriety and sober choices at dental conferences and in the dental community. I'm there, man. Sign me up for sure.
Excellent. We will put all the information to contact you in the show notes for anybody who is looking and just listening to this and not watching. And until next time, please, we honor you, we honor your choices, and you are enough. Thank you.